namandavats, 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 namandavats. Good morning, everyone. This is Sunday, September 27th, our family service live on YouTube, thanks to OCBC's AV team. We will begin with the Sambutsuge on page 33, and then continuing in the order of service, we'll have selected saying number 16 on page 16 in our service book, and then I'm going to give a Dharma talk, and then we'll close with the selected saying again. And then we're very lucky today to have a musical offering from a member of the Vista Buddhist Temple on page 99 in the service book. It is Asa no Uta, and then we'll close the service with announcements and gasho. Namandavats, 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 namandavats. Kogen gigi ejem gokut nyose emyo muyo tosha nichigatsumani shuko enyo kaishitsu onpe yunyaku jumoku nyorai yogen chose murin shogaku daion koru jipo kaimon shojin sanmai chi e hitoku muryo shushoke u jindai zennen shobutsu okai gujin jin no kugo gai dai mumyo yokunu seison yomu ni no shishi jinrik boro kukun kodai chi e jimyo komyo iso jindo daisen ganga sabutsu zaisho ho kado shoji mifuge datsu fuse joi kainin shojin nyoze sanmai chi e ijo go se tokubutsu fugyo shigan isai kuku isanai on keshi ubutsu yakusen no kuman muryo naisho shunyo goja kuyo isai shito shobutsu funyo gudo kensho fugyaku inyo goja shobutsu seikai bufu kake mushu setsudo komyo shisho
変死小国女性精進異人難路老が差仏国土第一公主奇妙道場調節国女内音任務闘争がと愛民到達一切自法来生心熱症状糸が国経楽安穏古物神妙税が心象発願の日力少々欲自法生存知恵無下上路子孫東業経路心死小休独中学業精進忍術不下ナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブがにしくどく平等性一切どんもない一心往生安楽Namandavats, namandavats, 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 namandavats. Namandavats, namandavats, namandavats. So I wanted to thank you all for joining me here on YouTube Live. I could even hear the people in the AV room chanting, which is a very nice surprise. I know it's still COVID season. We're still working under a pandemic, but we're still able to put on these Dharma talks from all the wonderful volunteers. Reverend Dr. Wandra came in and put up the flowers on the onaijin, chrysanthemums, and I was able to get pomegranates from my backyard as the osonae on the altar. So I would like to begin with this selected saying, number 16 on page 16. It's from Shinran Shonin, the founder of our tradition. The Nembutsu, for its practitioners, is not a practice or a good act. Since it is not performed out of one's own designs, it is not a practice. Since it is not good done through one's own calculation, it is not a good act.
because it arises wholly from other power and is free from self-power. For the practitioner, it is not a practice or a good act. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So I chose this because I would like to talk about this idea in our tradition with some metaphors and some examples. I've always found this quote confusing. As a person new to Buddhism and new to Pure Land Buddhism, I always confused self-power with self-effort, that it's a matter of trying hard or accomplishing something very difficult through discipline. And I thought that was a good thing in Buddhism. And other power, to me, sounded like a higher power, that there's some higher being out there operating on me in my life. And so I found these two things to be confusing. But I've been taught over 20 years that this is an approach. These are two different approaches to Buddhism. Or you can think of it as a different way of thinking. Self-power means following rules, being disciplined, having a regimented path of gates and gradual achievement and progress. Other power is immersing yourself within a process and relaxing and getting out of your own way and letting this process do its work on you. And we use both of these techniques, I would say, in everyday life in America, but we don't think of it this way. When I started doing math, I was a self-power mathematician. I was a self-power computer programmer. I memorized and I did tons of problems. But then I had a teacher that wanted me to think, and I had to go other power. I had to immerse myself and think the way a mathematician would think. Or you have to think the way a computer thinks. And once you see the world that way, it seems natural. The next step is a natural progression. You don't have to calculate or think about it. It's the only reasonable thing you can do. So the title of today's Dharma talk is two approaches. You can live your life without a recipe, or you can live your life with a recipe. And right now during COVID, there's two things going on. Everyone is cooking and baking at home, and also everybody's trying to figure out how to live their life in a pandemic with stay-at-home caution and social distancing. So I wanted to share this with you. When the stay-at-home order began, I think it was maybe Friday the 13th in March. It's been a long time. We started to order some of these at-home chef services because we were too scared to get to-go food. And so one of them is Blue Apron. I got very confused which one we used. I thought we used Home Chef. This is my official Home Chef notebook. But I can only find, I Googled Home Chef, but I kept finding HelloFresh. And I found out the reason why. If you look here real close, there's this little green diagonal. These two companies merged. So I think maybe Home Chef merged with HelloFresh, and now it's only HelloFresh. But it was a service, and you could order meals, and they would be delivered at your door in a box, packed in ice bags. And they came with recipes and directions. So you open up the box, you get all the little baggies out, and you lay out all your ingredients. So everything's pre-measured. You don't have to go get anything, and you don't have to measure anything. It's like on those cooking shows. It looks so easy because everything's already in a little bowl. And then what they give you is they send you a recipe to go with that meal. So I have my Home Chef recipes, and I've got my little cover, and each one of these is a meal that we cooked as a family. So they show you a picture of what it should look like when you're done, and then you follow these directions. The directions are relatively complicated, I think. it took 3 of us to get this right. And I didn't really feel like I was actually learning how to cook. I felt like I was learning how to follow recipes and how to follow directions. And it turned out great, and it was wonderful meals, and it was kind of a family project that we really enjoyed. But I thought it was hard, and I didn't really think I was getting better in terms of cooking. I was just good at executing directions and instructions. So that's a self-power approach. But I've also, another thing I've been doing besides cooking and trying to figure out how to live a life when you stay at home, I've also been gobbling up Netflix content. And there is a chef, and what she suggests is a totally different approach. You master these 4 elements. And if you could master these 4 elements, you can master the kitchen. So there's no recipes. Learn more about each element and cook the recipes from the show. So these elements, these 4 fundamental elements, almost like the 4 fundamental forces in physics, she says every great meal is a chemistry experiment, and it consists of 4 elements, flavor elements: salt, fat, acid, and heat. And I was mixed up for a while because I thought heat meant the temperature in the oven. But heat means peppers, chilies, spices. So salt, fat, acid, and spices. So we all know what salt is. But fat isn't necessarily bad fat. Olive oil, a little butter, these are necessary components to a great meal. Acid, I wasn't sure what this was either, but it's lemons, limes, cooking with wine. And then heat, we talked about spices. So what you do is you cook by taste. You open up your refrigerator, you take out what you have, and you start mixing things together, and you try to balance these flavors. And if you're low in acid, you'll taste it. If you're missing salt, you'll taste it. So it's an intuitive approach to cooking. You understand the chemistry of it. You play with flavors. So the wonderful chef, she did a cookbook. She hosted a Netflix series called Salt, Fat, Acid, and Heat that you can watch right now. Not right now, but after my Dharma talk. Her name is Samin Nosrat. She's a very enthusiastic chef. And I wanted to show you the trailer for this 4-part series on Netflix.
I've spent my entire life in pursuit of flavor. I've traveled the world to explore the things that define good cooking.
Let me get some forks.
No matter where I go, the same elements make food delicious.
You're laughing and crying.
Laughing and crying. That's pretty much the story of my life.
Salt, fat, acid, and heat. Just 4 basic elements can make or break a dish. The more I travel and taste the different cuisines of the world,
Wow, muy dulces.
the more I realize that good cooking is universal.
This is my... It's so spicy.
Drink some beer. You okay?
Have you ever made short ribs?
Never.
And this is such a good lesson. It's a flavor bomb in your mouth.
Oh, it's so good.
I'm just gonna live here now, eat cheese and butter until I die.
Be thoughtful. Wow, be curious. Good cooking is within reach for everyone.
So cooking is something you experience. It's within all of us, and she's trying to pull it out. I want to give you a little quick hint, is that salt is the domain of Japan. Should we reboot? Okay, great, super. This is why we have AV people here. Thank you very much. So I wanted to read a little bit of description about this show and her approach. With her new show, Samin Nosrat aimed to strike a balance between cooking as aspirational and accessible. So it's something we aspire to, but it's something very accessible, very pedestrian. It's not scary French cooking. It's something that is organic within us. Just like her book, it's divided into 4 parts, one for each of what she considers to be the essential elements of cooking: salt, fat, acid, and heat. The 4-part series is a blend of travel, food, and cooking shows, with each episode based in a different country. Salt is in Japan. Fat is in the United States. Fat is in Italy. The cheeses, I forgot to mention. Acid is in Mexico with the tropical fruits. And heat is in the United States, in Berkeley, California. It's more cinematic than a regular cooking show, but it also has more practical information and cooking tips than the typical food or travel show. So this is her book, Salt, Fat, Acid, and Heat, Mastering the Elements of Good Cooking. So I'd like to pivot now and move towards something a little bit more Buddhist, but the approach is the same. So the approach that she takes to cooking, I think Shinran takes to Buddhist practice. And we also have a book. This is a famous book in our tradition. It's the major writings of Shinran Shonin, and it's called the Kyo-Gyo Shinsho. And it deals with teaching, practice. They use the word here, faith, and enlightenment. So again, salt in Japan, fat, cheese, Italy, olive oil, acid in Mexico, and heat in the United States, spices. And then we have for our tradition, kyo means the teachings, gyo means practice, sho is realization, and this is typically the 3 pillars of Buddhist practice: teachings, practice, and realization, the 3 pillars of the path. But Shinran throws in a 4th, shin, which you could translate as confidence or an inner knowing, faith that the process works. The only way to immerse yourself into a process is you have to believe and have faith that it's going to work. So to follow this cooking approach or to follow Shinran, you have to have faith that if you immerse yourself in a process, that it has an effect on you, a natural effect. So Shinran is a little hard to understand, and we need a little help understanding Shinran, just like we need a little help understanding how to cook. I'm going to use a couple quotes from this book. It's called Shinran, An Introduction to His Thought, and we're going to go to the section on the dissolution of self-power. And we're going to look at how, what Shinran says on the subject. And when I read these quotes, I kind of laughed. I think 20 years ago I would have gotten frustrated, but Shinran takes the approach that there's no roadmap, there's no recipe. You have to immerse yourself in the 4 pillars of Buddhism. You have to listen, you have to bow, you have to come to temple, and you have to chant. And those 4 elements will make a great dish out of your Buddhist practice. So Shinran is on the path. He's not giving us a recipe. So it says here, Shinran advises his followers, simply entrust yourself to the teachings. Yet in his writings, there is no instruction concerning how one should do this, and no description of a general process. He never gives us a recipe. This recipe we need because we want one that results in a realization or awakening. But this is to be expected. Were there some course of action to be fulfilled, it would become our own practice, subject to our deliberation and designs. And then the other quote I liked very much is, of course, this is very frustrating if you're looking for recipes. Shinran gives no concrete advice, just like the great cook. This is a special characteristic of his thought. a difficulty not encountered in other forms of Buddhism. When we look to Mahayana masters in India or in China, we find that the central issues of their teachings revolved around the practices that should be performed in order to reach awakening. So I think if you went to that Simone Nosrat and you asked her, how many cups of butter should I add? Or when do I add the peppers? Or how long do I cook them? Or how hot should the oven be? I'm not sure she would tell you. I think she would say you taste it, and you taste it, and you taste it. And over time, you'll know what to add. And I wanted to mention her approach works. We actually do this now. We don't buy Home Chef or Blue Apron. We actually open the fridge, like I mentioned, and we take out ingredients, and it's kind of haphazard, and we look at what we got, and we decide what we can make, and we taste as we go, and we create a dish. And the only problem is we don't know how to make it. We don't know how to, it's not reproducible. Every dish is unique. Every dish is special. So this quote goes on, thus, we can accept that if the path of action they expound is executed, one can attain the same realization. So this is the other masters who supply very specific recipes. The method of practice is clearly presented, and the basic problem for us is whether or not we follow their guidance. So I wanted to share with you an example that I saw in Japan on one of the Jodo Shinshu temples in Kyoto. We were walking, shopping, waiting for our ordination training to begin. And I saw this sign on the side of a Jodo Shinshu temple. It was a Higashi temple. We're Nishi, but we're like brothers and sisters. And on the sign, it was written in Japanese. It's written in Spanish. It's written in Chinese. But it was also written in English. And it just happened to catch my eye. And this is what it said in English at a Jodo Shinshu temple. It said, now, life is living you. I always thought I was living life. This is my life. I got a set of values. I've got a recipe. I've got a 20-year plan. I've got goals that I'm going to achieve. And this is how I'm going to execute it. But that's a self-power orientation. Another way of looking at your life is that life lives you. The pandemic is a good example of this. Our lives have completely changed. I think I heard about COVID early February, mid-February, and I didn't think anything of it. Those diseases never come to America. And then suddenly, everything changed. Everything we do has been impacted by this. Everyone's wearing masks. Everybody's socially distant. I'm the only person at temple today. The traffic, the parking lots, the commercials on TV are different. So you can fight that and be frustrated and angry, and this isn't the life this is how it wasn't supposed to be, or life lives you. You embrace change. You become part of this new reality, and you don't struggle with it. So I've always kept this in mind, that as a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist, a Pure Land practitioner, if you feel that life is now living you, you have reached an other power approach to Buddhism. You've become a master, not only at cooking, but walking the path. It is something you do. The path itself is awakening. The activity of practicing is itself insight and realization. It's not something you have to grasp. It's not something you have to figure out. It's not something you have to, it's not a manual. Awakening is automatic. And so I think of self-power and other power is this way. We still have to try really hard. It has nothing to do with effort. And there's no cooking god out there. There's no deity out there. But we immerse ourselves in a process that affects us profoundly. The way we look at the world and the way we look at ourselves. So if you could please join me in Gasho. Now life is living you. Namo Amidabuts, Naman Dabuts, Naman Dabuts. So I'd like to reread this quote. This is a traditional way of doing Dharma talks. It's called the Gosandai. I hope that's what it's called. You read a quote from Shinran, you talk about it, and then if you did a good job, you talked about this quote, and this quote makes more sense. So I hope when we read this now, rather than confused by the words, we can relate it to this idea of immersing self one in a process, without goals and without steps. The Nembutsu for its practitioners is not a practice or a good act. Since it is not performed out of one's own designs, it is not a practice. Since it is not good done through one's own calculation, it is not a good act. Because it arises wholly from other power and is free of self-power, for the practitioner, it is not a practice or a good act. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So, next on our service schedule, we mentioned that we've been trying to do this every week. We try to get a musical offering from our Sangha members. This musical offering doesn't have to necessarily be Buddhist, but it's like the pomegranates and the flowers on the Naijin. It's when you receive the Dharma and you consider it something of value, you return a gift of something of deep value. So this is Annette Inoue from the Vista Buddhist Temple, offering her talent and her art and her feelings about Buddhism as a thank you in gratitude for being able to receive the teachings. So this is called Asa no Uta, on this morn. I don't know Japanese that well, but I know that asa is morning, and no is the possessive, like apostrophe S, and uta is song. So it could also be like the morning song. So she actually does, this is a 4 times musical offering. It's 4 times the normal offering. She's playing 4 parts, so in harmony. So she plays the flute in 4 different pitches, and she's harmonizing with herself. So on page 99, if you can sing at home. Thank you very much, Annette. That was wonderful. We always are soliciting these donations, and we have one planned for every service. So we're trying to continue with chanting, selected sayings, Dharma talk, and musical offerings. And also, we want to also provide announcements, just like a normal service. So I wanted to mention that there's an important seminar coming up. It's called Good Trouble, and this is something that John Lewis said, a famous civil rights activist, marched with Martin Luther King. He passed away in July. He was a House of Representative from Georgia. So it will be taught by Richard Stambul. He's an attorney, past BCA president, and he was also a foot soldier in the civil rights movement. He's also a trustee of the Institute of Buddhist Studies at the Jodo Shinshu Center. He met Martin Luther King when he was in the South in the 1960s. So the description of this seminar is tens of thousands marched throughout America and around the world following the horrific death of George Floyd. What led to this seemingly sudden outpouring of solidarity? How do we deal with the burden of injustice and of racial inequality? How can we awaken to our history of depraved indifference and brutality? This will be held on Saturday, October 10th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. It's free and open to everyone, but donations, of course, are gratefully accepted. You can find information on this at the website BuddhistChurchesOfAmerica.org. You can also contact the Continuing Buddhist Education, the CBE, at cbe@bcahq.org. You can also call the number 510-809-1460. These are all on the slide, and there are flyers available. So this would be something very, very important to attend. So I want to thank you very much for coming to this service. I know you're out there. I want to thank the AV crew, Reverend Wonder for her flowers, my garden for the pomegranates, and we'll see you next Sunday live from the OCBC Hondo. Thank you very much. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, Naman Dabuts, Naman Dabuts, Naman Dabuts.